mentioned a while
So
ago. You mentioned a while ago the difference in accountability structures in the private sector in many cases versus the public sector, and the fact that you, in your capacity as a minister, had to really be actively involved in a couple of public utilities to the point where you said sometimes you wished you were the CEO. What does it say about how we appoint boards and how we appoint CEOs to these public utilities, and in some instances state enterprises, that has not been working for the country? Because very often it seems we don't have the right people or structures in place to measure their performance or to keep the utility or the enterprise accountable and performing.
Well, I think the last point you said was very key. I think there is this structure very early, and I think in one of my interviews, sometimes somebody asks a similar question, and the whole structure, the structure of the public service and the structure of some of those utilities, they are not structured for performance. They're not structured for accountability. And therefore, I'll give you an example. While I worked at Republic Bank, we go back to the days when I first joined the bank and you were a branch manager. And then we moved from being a branch manager, we had an operations manager and a credit manager. And then we moved from an operations manager and a credit manager to an area credit manager. And then we moved back to a retail services manager. And then we moved to a corporate manager. I probably went through about 10 iterations of structures that was all geared towards trying to make the bank more customer-centric, more efficient. That's the private sector operating. They didn't get it right the first time, but after 10, they got it right. That is not possible. That doesn't happen in the public sector. You have a structure and that's it. It's never tweaked. And therefore, and the process to tweaking it takes so long that you end up in a number of these organizations with an old functional structure. And this functional structure doesn't allow for the cross-fertilization of management. And you cannot hold people accountable properly because you are doing a function, they're not structured in a manner to hold someone accountable. So when something happens, that's one of my beefs at WASA. When something happened, you couldn't say, listen, you are in charge of distribution. You are in charge of production. We have a production problem. I'm holding you accountable for the water. I'm holding you accountable for the number of leaks that we have. And it was difficult in a number of areas to hold people accountable. And that's because of the bureaucracy in making those changes. And it has a right to do with the types of boards that we have, because a lot of the times the board members, again, you're operating within limited time frames. And you enter a board, and by the time you get involved in a board, you have management that has been there for a long time. And the board comes in and it takes them about a year or two to get themselves going. The management basically ends up managing themselves. And therefore, you do not always get optimal performance when you are the manager and you are managing yourself, because the board itself is not a board that knows all of the things with the industry, what's going on with the industry. So those structures and the structures as it relates to the political system, even within the public sector. In the public sector, as you know, we have these commissions: Public Service Commission, Teaching Service Commission, Police Service Commission. And a lot of us do not realize that, for example, the Commissioner of Police, the Minister of National Security, right or wrong, is not the one responsible for crime. He can't, as a matter of fact, his ability he cannot have, his input in the police commissioner's assessment is limited, all right? It's not that easy. If you see something, you can't get rid of a teacher just like that, because you have to go to a police service commission. If something doesn't happen in the public sector, you can't just get rid of someone. So when I spoke earlier about the link between accountability and structures, that's what I meant. And therefore, we need to critically look at some of the structures that we have, one, those service commissions, right, and help to make them and hold them more accountable so that we will be able to take action on people that are not performing at a faster rate.
Do you think that we as a country are looking at our public utilities and in some instances state enterprises in a way that is transformational and visionary? Or is it that we are still at the stage where we're trying to get them right and threading water, to use an analogy? When you think of, for example, what TSTT can be, you mentioned some structural changes and transformations to make the utility viable moving forward because it was on the way to becoming bankrupt, as opposed to TSTT understanding its role in ICT and telecom, which is the foundation of any developing country or developed country status. When you think of TN Tech and what they can and should be doing in terms of branching off into renewable energies and not just using hydrocarbons to drive electricity supply or power supply, or any of the other utilities in Trinidad and Tobago, where they should be looking at being in 10, 15, 20 years, given where the world is going, as opposed to just basically operating at a basic functional level. Are we there yet? Are those conversations taking place?
Well, you know, the answer is no. And the answer is not as much as they should. Because those answers require you to make decisions. And a lot of times we try to make these decisions when they are a little bit too late. So it's a little bit of kicking the can down the road. So take TSTT, for example. I mean, what TSTT did, TSTT needed to do. But the reality is they probably did it about 5 years too late. They did it at a point in time when they came in. I mean, everyone knew that you were coming in, you were going in, you were moving from a monopoly to a competition, to free competition. You needed to get yourself leaner, meaner, you needed to be more visionary, you needed to be able to be more responsive, you needed a new structure. Everyone, a lot of us, there are lots of bright people around. The movement, the taking of that somewhere within our own political structure, our own divides, our own inabilities between our politicians and between what our citizens accept, all right, and a number of other factors prevents these things from happening. So therefore, TSTT did not go into a restructuring until 2016. By that time, their retained earnings had dwindled, right? And therefore, the things that they did was 6 to 10 years too late. And then we get into a comfort zone because we accept the mediocrity, we accept a comfort level. And that's part of the problem with us as citizens. I mean, we as a country, and I think the Prime Minister said it, that, you know, we underperform as a country because we have so much and we just accept the mediocrity because it's okay. And therefore, a lot of these organizations, they end up being dealt with when it's critical. I mean, WASA could be fixed. It could be fixed. There's no reason that we are producing 240 million gallons of water in Trinidad and Tobago. I mean, we are producing, we pay for the water, we spend a lot of money in production, and we produce probably 2.5 times more water than we require. And yet still only 50% of the population gets water. But it requires some hard decisions. It requires you to make decisions and act. Now, a lot of times politicians are not prepared to make those decisions, and politicians are a reflection of the country. Because if you make them, then you get backlash from the population and people. There is not an ability within ourselves as a country for us to make hard decisions that are right for us. I mean, take the whole idea of our revenue authority and the amount of money that is being lost there. There are obvious decisions that are correct for this country, but we're just not doing them because they are difficult. they are difficult, and therefore we stay at the level of mediocrity, and we stay at the level of a comfort zone that is way below where we should be going.
What is the imperative now for Trinidad and Tobago? You've laid out very clearly